The Packers enjoying the weekend off after that 34-17 win in Santa Clara on Thursday night. We're joined by Matt Schneidman now, who covers the Packers for The Athletic. Matt, I'll ask you first, generally, what do you think of that win on Thursday? Because, it seems like NFC Championship, you kind of get your revenge out in California, but, man, that team did not look anything like the 49ers team the Packers lost to, I should say, twice last year. So what do you make of it? Going out to Santa Clara and just kind of taking care of business.
Yeah, the Packers did what they needed to do, and I know that's cliche, but listen, Matt LaFleur and Mike Pettin and those guys will not apologize for stomping on the 49ers after what the 49ers did to them last year. And Kyle Shanahan, if there's any coach in the NFL who can get the most out of, second and third stringers, it's Kyle Shanahan. So the win still counts for something. I'm watching all of these games today. I don't know if there's any good teams left in the NFL. I mean, the Chiefs are pretty good, but the Steelers are losing right now. The Seahawks lost to the Bills today. The Buccaneers and Saints play tonight. Packers are right in the thick of things. And I know, especially with the Jaguars coming up and a couple weaker teams coming down the stretch, people are going to say, oh, the Packers didn't beat anyone just like last year. You got to beat the teams that you're supposed to beat to get into the playoffs. And we saw the Packers lose to the Vikings. They didn't do that a couple weeks ago, but they did in Santa Clara. They took care of business. And they got the monkey off their back, metaphorically speaking, after what went down at Levi's Stadium last year.
What did you make of DeVante Adams' "I'm the best receiver in the league" comments the other night? Because it seemed like the national media really latched onto that on Friday and was kind of coming after him a little bit. I saw you wrote a column on this. It didn't seem like a surprise to us around here because we've watched him for a number of years, and, man, he's right up there.
Yeah, I would say so. I think if you're in the NFL, whether if you're DeVante Adams or Alan Lazard or someone else, you got to have the mindset that nobody's better than you. I mean, some guys say it and you don't believe them because they're just saying it to not come across as not confident in themselves per se. But when DeVante Adams says it, you have good reason to believe it. He has the numbers to back it up. He's the first guy to have at least 150 receiving yards and 3 games with multiple touchdowns, I believe it is, in one season. And he's done it in 6 games. He hasn't even played the full 8 games. So his numbers are ridiculous. He leads the NFL in receiving yards per game, receiving touchdowns per game, leads the league in receiving touchdowns, has missed 2.5 games. So he's really special. And I still think DeAndre Hopkins is the best receiver in the league, but once you're getting into the semantics of the top 3, it really is anybody's game. So yeah, a lot of people are going to say that they're the best because that's just, their confidence, and that's how they got to the league in the first place, is being confident in themselves. But DeVante has an actual claim, so I don't think there was anything wrong with what he said.
So Rodgers and Adams were pretty much what we've gotten used to so far this season. Those two were great. Aaron Jones certainly made an impact coming back and playing more than I think many of us thought he would. But what really stood out to me is the defense, specifically the Smiths making some plays. Preston with the pressure on the interception. Za'Darius getting that strip sack fumble all by himself. It's so clear when those two play well, the defense can go to another level. But how do you think they sustain it? Because it's one thing to do it against a backup left tackle and Nick Mullins, but you're going to have some tougher competition down the road.
No doubt. And even though it was against the 49ers JV team, it was nice to see the Smiths step up because with Preston, he's barely inside the top 100 in quarterback pressures this year. I mean, after his dominant season last season, it's kind of fallen off the face of the earth this year. So to see him get that pressure that led to Raven Green's interception, the Packers had to like that. With Za'Darius, what kept him out of the Defensive Player of the Year conversation last year was the lack of turnover forcing plays per se. He didn't really have any forced fumbles or interceptions or strip sacks. And he has 2 this year. He had 1 against the Saints, 1 against the 49ers, where he causes the fumble and recovers it himself. He's tied for 3rd in the league in sacks right now. That was what he had last year to go along with the pressures. He's starting to pick it up pressure-wise. And yes, it was against a backup left tackle in Justin School for most of the night, but Za'Darius schooled him, pun intended, and that's what you got to do against a guy like that. And it was good to see for the Packers defense, the interception, the strip sack, and recovery, because those turnover forcing plays, those game-changing plays, have not been there this year. And we've asked coaches week in, week out, what will it take? And they finally started to show a little bit of that on Thursday, and they're going to have to down the stretch if they want to help the offense win some games.
I mentioned Aaron Jones a little bit ago as well. He certainly added an extra spark to this offense that they haven't really had. I mean, Jamal Williams against the Texans came in and had some nice runs, but Jones has just got that burst that really, kind of adds some juice to the offense, if you will. It's interesting when I look at it. He's an expiring contract. David Bakhtiari is an expiring contract. Kevin King's an expiring contract. They've all been injured, in and out of the lineup for the last month or so. I'm curious how you think things maybe have changed, whether it's from the Packers end, looking at how they've played without those guys, or from those players' side of things, maybe we're seeing some of their value more than we had in the past. Do you think those players being injured now maybe changes the way they're expiring contracts and are going to be looked at and how the Packers are looking at them?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think with Kevin King, what he had to do this season to show that he earned that second contract was stay healthy for his second straight year, because the book on him through his first 2 seasons was this guy can never stay healthy. He missed more games than he played. Then last season, he plays really well, stays healthy, and seems to earn that contract. And then this season, it was, all right, let's see him stay healthy again, play well again. And, he was questionable for the Buccaneers game, and I was in Tampa, saw him work out before the game. He looked good, then has a setback, and all of a sudden he hasn't played since. So his value is diminishing. Kadar Holman, Josh Jackson, not guys that are nearly as good as King, but they've gotten by. Their pass defense is not why they lost to the Vikings. It's not why they lost to the Buccaneers. So King's value, I think, has gone down while he's hurt. I hate to say it because, Jones is a tremendous player, but I think his value has gone down too, just because you see what Jamal has done. He had over 100 total yards in both games that Aaron Jones missed. Obviously not this most recent game against the 49ers because Jamal didn't play either, but against the Vikings and the Texans, Jamal topped 100 yards in both games. And yes, Aaron Jones is far better than Jamal. I'm not, disputing that, but they can get Jamal for a lot cheaper. And I don't think the drop off from Jones to Jamal is enough that would really affect a game. And if the Packers can save that money on their running backs and use it to keep David Bakhtiari or Corey Linsley, I would like to think they do it to keep Bakhtiari, then I think that's what they would lean to do. Bakhtiari's value hasn't changed at all. He's still one of the best left tackles in football, and his value will remain the same regardless. It's not like Billy Turner or Rick Wagner is going to diminish that, but I think Bakhtiari stayed the same, and then King and Jones' value has dropped a little bit.
I saw your tweet today about the Vikings maybe being the second best team in the NFC North. It's interesting because the way the Bears started, obviously everybody looked and said, Chicago's back. It's going to be Green Bay, Chicago battling for the NFC North. I kind of agree with you. I mean, I think when Minnesota is rolling, they are probably right up there with the Packers as not the best, but the second best behind Green Bay in the division. They've dug themselves quite a hole here at this point, obviously. But do you think the Vikings could be a threat with the way they played again today to maybe come back and make a playoff push?
No, I don't think they're a threat to the Packers. I think they're the second best team in the division, but I don't think there's really any chance for them to make a run at this thing. They play the Saints, they play the Buccaneers in the second half of the schedule, and the Packers, no game's a cakewalk as we saw against the Vikings, but they have the Jaguars coming up. They have the Bears a couple times, and the Bears offense, quite frankly, is no good as we've seen, and we saw it again today. Even the Packers defense might be able to stop them. So then they play the Eagles, the Panthers. I mean, all games they should win. So I think the Packers, I don't want to say they're going to run away with it because it's still very early. The Bears are still a winning team by their record. But just watching Dalvin Cook, I think he's the best running back in football. I think the Vikings have the second best team in the division, I would say, behind the Bears. And it's Green Bay's division to lose. They're 6-2 right now. The Bears are 5-4. They haven't had their bye week yet. But if the Packers can pick up a win against the Jaguars, take a 2-game lead here, they could really take a stranglehold on this thing. So I don't see the Vikings being competition because they're still 3 games behind the Packers. But, nobody knows what can happen in the NFL. For all I know, the Packers could go out and lose to the Jaguars. But I think the Packers should have a relatively comfortable time winning this division.
And last one here before I let you go, but I just feel like it's something we need to address, and that's the COVID situation that we saw spring up a little bit last week. 2 players testing positive, 5 total going on the COVID reserve list. Especially Jordan Love kind of stands out, and Matt LaFleur talked about this a little bit on Friday. It looks like Jordan Love was placed on there as a close contact, but we've seen how this can spread and put other players on the list as a close contact. You cannot afford to lose your quarterbacks, especially Aaron Rodgers. Do you think this maybe changes the way the Packers operate? Maybe they bring in another quarterback. Maybe they operate their meetings differently. I mean, is this kind of – it seemed like listening to LaFleur on Friday, it maybe opened his eyes a little bit to the fact that, whoa, if this infiltrates my quarterback room, we're in trouble.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think you heard that in his voice. And he said it. They're going to try better this week to distance their quarterbacks during meetings. Obviously, you can only do so much during practice. And Jordan Love will not be practicing at the start of the week because he's not allowed back in the building for at least 5 days. And that's if he continues to be asymptomatic and not test positive. So we'll see when he gets back out on the practice field. As far as meetings, I would expect, like Matt LaFleur said, maybe put one quarterback in a separate room, or tell Jordan Love to stay home or Tim Boyle to stay home and just zoom in. I mean, more so than any other position group, not only because it's the most shallow position group in terms of personnel numbers, but because it's the most important position on the team, and the Packers have one of the best starting quarterbacks in the league, and they cannot afford to have – I'm not laughing because it's funny, but they can't afford to have Aaron Rodgers, land on the reserve COVID list, because then they're
You're laughing because you're nervous. I'm doing the same thing. That's crazy.
I'm thinking about how Matt LaFleur feels, and I mean, you have A.J. Dillon and Chris Barnes who tested positive, and then Jordan Love, Jamal Williams, and Kamal Martin, who are all on the list. Jamal and Kamal were eligible to come back into the facility yesterday. They haven't officially been activated yet for the transaction wire, but it's a very precarious situation. As we've seen, things can change on a day-to-day basis. You never know if, someone tests positive the day of a game, day before a game. But I think the way the Packers are looking at it, they got their first scare of this thing this past week. And before it gets out of control like it did with the Titans, they're going to nip this thing in the bud. And if that means having Aaron Rodgers stay at home to zoom in so he doesn't, catch this thing, I think that's what they're going to do, because they're going to do anything to keep him on the field.
Yeah, and again, just for the viewers, it wouldn't necessarily take him catching it in terms of testing positive, but
right.
Hypothetically, if one of the other quarterbacks were to catch it, Rodgers could easily be a close contact. And last week, we definitely got a good look at how that can affect things. So we'll see. We'll continue to follow that here as the Packers return to work starting later this week. Matt, we appreciate your time as always. Go give him a follow on Twitter at Matt Schneidman. Read his work at The Athletic. Thanks again.
Appreciate it.